Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his new cabinet today. There were a number of changes of interest to Indigenous people. APTN's Fraser Needham has more, beginning with an Inuit ceremony to kick off the proceedings.
Sally Webster lit a kulik, a traditional Inuit oil lamp, to bring light and warmth to the cabinet shuffle. Perhaps the biggest move, former Health Minister Patty Hajdu becomes the new Indigenous Services Minister. Best known for her many press conferences during the pandemic, Hajdu says it's a huge honor to be in her new role.
And to work with Indigenous communities from across this country. I think it's a critical role in our government's efforts to further reconciliation. And I'm just thrilled to be able to serve my country and Indigenous people in this way.
Former Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller slides over to Crown Indigenous Relations. One of his priorities will be around land.
The relationship has been broken because of land theft, and it's time to give land back, and that's just the reality of it. It's easily said, it's more difficultly done.
On Monday, NDP MP Charlie Angus asked for the removal of Carolyn Bennett as Crown Indigenous Minister, and it happened. And she now heads up a new department, Mental Health and Addictions, but she doesn't feel like she's been demoted and speaks fondly of her 6 years in Crown Indigenous Relations.
I am extraordinarily proud of what we've been able to do as a government on the journey of reconciliation, and from closing gaps to righting wrongs to being able to accelerate the path to self-determination. This has been an extraordinary journey.
Trudeau reiterated his commitment to reconciliation.
While we move forward on fighting climate change, we need to include reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in every job we take, in every step of the way.
However, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh said it is time for Trudeau to put action to words.
Stop fighting Indigenous kids in court. Immediately make sure that every Indigenous community has clean drinking water. And truly, to walk the path of justice, we've got two really clear paths that have been laid out. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission has the calls to action, and the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls has the calls to truth. Let's see those implemented.
Parliament resumes on November 22nd. I'm Fraser Needham for APTN National News, Ottawa.
Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole does not seem impressed by the Prime Minister's new cabinet. He released this statement saying, "At a time when Canadians are looking for a serious plan to secure Canada's economic future and address the inflation crisis, the Prime Minister appointed a group of largely inexperienced and ideologically driven individuals who represent a real risk to our economic prosperity and our national unity. This is yet another example of Justin Trudeau's record of style over substance." Well, joining us now to give his take on the shuffle is Brett Forrester, the host of Nation to Nation. Brett, thanks for being with us. What do you make of Mark Miller taking what many would characterize as a lateral move?
Well, personally, I'm not surprised. You have to remember that Mark Miller served initially as the parliamentary secretary under Carolyn Bennett, so he's familiar with the department, he's familiar with the issues. However, it is just a different file. The Indigenous Services Minister is technically, according to the law, the top Indian agent in the country, and that's not really an easy position for anybody to be in. So now that he's in Crown Indigenous Relations, he's in a smaller department with a new mandate, and it's mainly a negotiating mandate.
What will be his first order of business as Crown Indigenous Relations Minister?
Well, I asked him that at today's news conference shortly after he was sworn in, and he didn't give a clear answer about what exactly his top priority will be, but he did say that it is time to get land back, or give land back, pardon me. He said the relationship with First Nations has been broken long before Canada has even been a country, and it's time to renew some of that relationship. Now, how he proposes to give land back remains to be seen, but it's an interesting comment to hear from the new Crown Indigenous Relations Minister.
Now, how surprised were you that former Health Minister Patty Hajdu will be taking on a big file, that of Indigenous Services?
I'm actually not too surprised. Some may see it as a demotion. However, Patty Hajdu was the health minister during the COVID-19 pandemic, and there are a lot of health-related issues that are going to be at the forefront for Indigenous services. The department previously promised to table Indigenous health legislation, and they're in the midst of the reform of the Jordan's Principle program. Similarly, the First Nations Inuit Health Branch was migrated over to Indigenous Services Canada a couple years ago, and so there was some difficulties in that migration that remained to be smoothed over. So she'll have quite a lot on her plate that her time as health minister may prepare her for.
Some had wanted Carolyn Bennett gone, and they got their wish. How should she take what looks like a demotion to a new Department of Mental Health and Addictions?
Well, she was asked to respond to some of those critics and some of those people who wanted her gone today at the press conference, and she was gracious in reply. You know, she said she was proud of the work they've been able to accomplish. She has been in that role since the Liberals won in 2015, and there has been a lot of movement. But what you've seen recently is a breakdown of trust among a lot of First Nations leadership who were among those asking her to be removed from cabinet. She wasn't removed from cabinet. She's in a different position now, but there wasn't a lot of trust to begin with there. So rebuilding that is going to be part of Mark Miller's mission as the new department head there.
All right, Brett, we'll have to leave it there, but I'm sure you'll have plenty on all of this coming up this week on Nation to Nation. Thanks for spending some time with us here today.
Thanks, Dennis.
Well, do you have any thoughts about Trudeau's new cabinet? Here's how you can continue the conversation. You can send us an email to news@aptn.ca or leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. Child and Family Services advocates brought their arguments to trial today against the Manitoba government. They say the province should pay back hundreds of millions to CFS agencies taken over the years through the Children's Special Allowance. Michelle Karlinzig has that story.
A 4-day civil trial at the Manitoba Court of Queen's Bench has started, which could end in the province of Manitoba paying back hundreds and millions to Indigenous CFS agencies. Agencies and advocates say that money belongs to Indigenous children in care. The case revolves around the Children's Special Allowance, a federal payment to families ranging from $500 to $800 per month. The NDP government started clawing back those payments from agencies, and the Conservatives continued the practice when they took it over in 2016. Now, it halted in 2019, but last year, a bill was passed under Section 231 of the Budget Implementation and Tax Statutes Amendment, also known as BITSA. BITSA denies the right to legally challenge the province on those clawbacks. Elsie Flett, a former CFS executive, is attempting to file a class action lawsuit on behalf of the kids. 16 Indigenous agencies stand behind her, and the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs is challenging BITSA, saying that it's unlawful. Now, there's about 12,000 kids in care today, according to AMC, and roughly 90% of those are Indigenous. In this morning's court trial, the CFS agency's lawyers said that children in care are especially vulnerable, and Indigenous children are in another level of vulnerability because of Canada's dark history. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs will be speaking at tomorrow's trial, and we'll be following this as it progresses through the week. Michelle Karlenzing, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Métis Child and Family Services organizations have also joined that fight. David Chartrand is the president of the Manitoba Métis Federation and joins us now. President Chartrand, thanks for being with us. So what are you looking for in this week's court proceedings?
Well, this is, again, thank you, Dennis, for having me on the show. And I think one is important to recognize here what's at stake. We're talking about a $250 million lawsuit of the clawbacks that originated with this province in 2006. They began to claw back and start taking the money away from the children, the Children's Special Allowance, which is equivalent to the child allowance you get from parents get. But this is a substantial amount of money. We're talking potentially $530 to $800 a child, Dennis, a month. And they've really been making the children pay for their services. And we want to put an end to that in Manitoba. That clawback is I think, unfitting for anybody in this country to make the children pay for their services after you apprehend them.
Well, can you tell us about what you'd want to see change in the law that was passed by the province of Manitoba?
Well, firstly, the province actually have been getting ready. I think this court case, they knew we were coming. We echoed that loud and clear to First Nation agencies and the Métis agencies that we were going to try to put a stop to this clawback because taking that money away from kids had to come to an end. They can say openly in media that they're not clawing back, which they are, Dennis. What they do is actually we get the money from child special allowance comes to our agencies, but they take that percentage off when they fund us on an annual basis. So that's a clawback. They're taking the money away. Now they put, of course, people should notice what they did is actually they put in place a single window envelope. So they're trying to get around that again from a legal context to argue that they're not clawing back and that this is a new formula, structured formula for that. So that, I think, is being flushed out. But the worst, they put legislation now. And Pallister's government, of course, was very keen on trying to put a prevention for us to sue the government, that we don't have a right times of lapse, and there's a new legislation passed by the government that we can't sue them for all the wrongs they've done. So they know they're doing wrong. They're trying everything right now in advance of the court case to try to protect themselves.
This has brought together all of the different Indigenous agencies out there. Why is it important to come together against this law?
Well, you know what, Dennis, let's look at it this way. We take children, and sometimes because the situation that's in place, then we take these children and they become full custody of our child welfare agencies. Then the federal government sets aside the special children's allowance money for them. Instead of saving that for them, putting it away, planning the future, getting ready one day when they become adults and they have to go on their own, that we could give them a head start in life. That's taken away from them. We, in fact, at the Métis agency, started our own program, Dennis. We have a registered education program for our children, but it's all federally funded directly with Canada. So we have that in place now. It's a new program. But this child allowance, special child allowance money, it's like taxing children, Dennis. It's like telling a 6-year-old or a 2-year-old or a 1-year-old they're gonna start paying taxes, because that's exactly what this province is doing by forcing them to pay for services, yet they're the ones apprehending them.
President Chartrand, an important case happening for sure this week. We'll have to leave it there, but appreciate you taking some time for us.
Thank you very much, Dennis. And I cross my fingers we'll be successful for the children, and the children could get the benefits that was robbed from them. So I wish them the best.
It was election night in Nunavut last night, but there would have been few congratulatory calls as the phone lines were down in parts of the territory. Details coming up. Welcome back. A search at the Charles Camsell Hospital in Edmonton last week showed no signs of human remains. Many Indigenous people had died in the hospital because of experimental treatments for TB and because of a lack of care. APTN's Chris Stewart has the latest.
The Charles Camsell Hospital has many stories from survivors who were sent there. Indigenous peoples from the north were subjected to experimental vaccines and treatments. People like Victor Bruno, who were sent from a residential school to the Camsell Hospital for treatment from tuberculosis for 2 years in the early 1950s. He says staff were experimenting on children on needle size for vaccines.
The size of the needle, the kids call it spike needle. I didn't know what that meant. Till much later I learned what the spike, it did look like a nail because the size of the needle.
Gene Dubb is a developer. He wants to convert the hospital to condos. He is paying for the excavation to locate possible burial locations. This summer, ground-penetrating radar found several possible burial sites on the grounds. An excavation found no remains.
Even if burials are not found here, it's important to do this search. Just so that people now know a little more about where their relatives might be.
A second ground-penetrating search found a possible 21 burial sites. Last week, a final excavation took place. Bruno attended the search.
The stuff they put in you, it's like famine. It just stung like a bee, you know. It burned. So yes, we definitely went through a lot of abuse. And once told my friend, you know, I felt like I went through a torture chamber.
The 2-day search of the 21 possible sites turned up no human remains.
It gives us peace of mind knowing that, well, none of our loved ones are here, or anybody else's loved ones as far as that goes. There's nobody here, which is a good thing now. Like I said, the big question is, where are they?
Other locations could be the Enoch Cree Nation, just west of Edmonton, and in St. Albert, north of Edmonton. Last week, APTN told a story of a former chief who never returned from the hospital and may be buried in an Enoch Cree Nation cemetery. Chief Calvin Bruno of the Papachase First Nation is an Edmonton-based band. He says the records were poorly kept at the hospital.
The research there's at least 98, 100 people that were that we know of that passed on there. And, you know, so if we can find out at least 100 graves, then, you know, they're all accounted for, but it's just that, you know, they're buried in different places.
Chief Bruno says he is consulting with elders and Treaty 6 and 8 Grand Chiefs on what the next step is. He says he will talk to Enoch Chief Billy Morin.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to have the Grand Chiefs involved. And, but yeah, no, I think it'd be a good idea to, you know, send him a message and, you know, see if they can look at maybe doing a ground search there.
He says the cost should be paid by the province and federal governments. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
To the north now, and Nunavut held its territorial election yesterday with 17 seats up for grabs. 2 cabinet ministers were re-elected, but half of all incumbents lost. Health Minister Lauren Kuzigak returned to the Assembly in his Rankin Inlet South riding. So did Finance Minister George Hicks, marking his 3rd term representing Iqaluit. Iqaluit Deputy Mayor Janet Brewster was also successful in her jump to territorial politics. She was one of 5 women elected. Voter turnout was just over 49%, down from 63% 4 years ago. MLAs meet in Iqaluit on November 17th to select a premier and cabinet. Well, if you were trying to call and congratulate someone in Nunavut about the election last night, you were likely out of luck as phones were out all over the territory except in Iqaluit. Northwestel told APTN News in an email that the loss of service was due to a high number of calls. That's a big problem if you need the police. Last night and this morning, Nunavut RCMP had to inform residents that if they need the RCMP, please go to the detachment as their phone lines were out of service. Service was restored this afternoon. The Gitxaala Nation in British Columbia says current laws regarding mining do not require consent or consultation with Indigenous nations. Yesterday, the nation filed a legal challenge in the BC Supreme Court over those laws because they've been living with the consequences of bad mining practices. In a press conference, Gitxaala leadership announced the legal challenge to the province's free entry mining laws. They're seeking to overturn multiple mineral claims granted by the province between 2018 and 2020 on Banks Island off of BC's north coast. They say the mineral claims are in their territory and were granted without the nation's consultation or consent.
We hope that by bringing this challenge forward, the government of British Columbia recognizes their own laws and practices are in opposition with their commitments, and that they recognize the need to put an end to the granting of mineral rights without consultation or consent for all Indigenous people.
A new episode of Face to Face airs tonight right after the news. We've got a preview for you coming up after the break. Welcome back. Time now for a photo of the day. Here is a photo of Izzy. Izzy, the adorable and lovable friend of our viewer William Blaine, who sent in this photo. If you have a furry friend, send us your photos. Tell us about your pet and what makes them so adorable. Be sure to send those photos to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east coast, 11 with showers for Halifax, 6 and rain in St. John's. 2 in Kuujjuaq, cloudy and 8 for Nain. 10 with rain in Montreal, 10 and cloudy in Saguenay. Showers and 10 in Sault Ste. Marie, 12 in North Bay. 11 in Thunder Bay, a cloudy day, and 8 for Sioux Lookout. 7 with rain for God's Lake and Norway House. Showers and 9 for Winnipeg and Gimli. Sunny and 11 for Regina and Saskatoon. 7 in Uranium City and Stony Rapids. In northern Alberta, 3 in High Level, 9 for Fort McMurray. 11 with rain in Edmonton, partly cloudy, and 11 in Lethbridge. Showers and 12 for Victoria and Vancouver. 8 with rain in Prince George, snow, and 3 for Dease Lake. Snow and 4 below in Old Crow, flurries and 2 in Whitehorse. Rain and 3 for Yellowknife, snow and 4 below in Norman Wells. More flurries and 5 below for Sax Harbor, -1 in Pawlatuck. +5 with rain for Whale Cove and Chesterfield. -10 with snow in Resolute, 0 in snow in Joe Haven. Anishinaabe artist Blake Anjikaneb is our guest on a new episode of Face to Face tonight. He's known for his mix of woodlands art and pop culture references. Anjikaneb's paintings that include things like Star Wars get a lot of views on social media, but it's more traditional work that he is looking to focus more on.
And that's the stuff that I really enjoy doing. Like that's the work I take the most pride in. So that's where I want my direction of all my art to go in. Like it's been fun, like having pop culture references and stuff, because that's gotten me a lot of exposure, right? Like when someone shares something on Facebook or Instagram, it's almost like a meme, right? Like if it goes viral because someone thinks it's funny or something, but I want my art to be not like that.
Blake is quite a talent. You can catch our entire episode of Face to Face in just about 2 minutes time. And be sure to tune in tomorrow live at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for In Focus. And for news anytime, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. Have a great night.